Hi, Tim, my friend. Oh,
I was
wonderful.
I was gonna see if I could widen this out, but I don't know. Maybe that better or
It
worse?
looks good.
Okay.
It's better like this. Hey, nice beard, man.
I had it bigger at one point. I've trimmed it back a bit, so
Hmm.
you're looking good as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I think I had my I didn't have somebody to cut my hair for like 3 months, and it was starting to get ugly, really. I had to wear the hat.
I think I saw a video where you had a hat on, or maybe that was yeah, that was one of your touch guitar episodes or something.
Yes.
So Marcus is getting super hip now. So you
I
got a haircut?
got a haircut, and I ran into this creepy guy who did an okay job, but he was sort of like he really liked me, started to feel me out like this, and it was creepy. I sometimes have this kind of experience. Like once, like when I was in my early 20s, I went to a tailor to have my my pants shortened or whatever it was, and that was quite something. Like it was almost abusive.
Wow. Well,
And this guy reminded me of that guy. It's really,
you felt a similar vibe happening.
yeah,
Wow. Well, I'm glad you escaped with everything intact.
yes, yeah, 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 Tim. So this is special for me to be talking to you because you're one of my best friends, and
Yeah,
uh, we've known each other for a long time, and
we have.
we're connected in many different ways, I think,
Yeah.
and so like I'm kind of curious. Maybe I would like to start this conversation asking you to tell me something that I don't know about you.
Okay.
Any idea?
No. Um, what don't you know about me? Well, there's probably lots of things, but uh, yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I'm not really sure where to start, but the fact is that I grew up in a music family. My mom was a singer. You might know that. But she in 1939, 1940, 41, she sang in big bands
Hmm.
in Ohio. That's where I'm originally from, the Midwest. And so, the fact that she was into jazz and all that stuff. And then I have two older sisters who were both singers. So I grew up with my mom's record collection and my two older sisters' record collection, and there was always music in the house. There was always both of my sisters played acoustic guitar, and they were into folk music like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell and all of that stuff. And my oldest sister, Mary Lou, was into the Beatles. And I still remember, like, when I was 6 or 7, Beatles records amongst the pile, like Magical Mystery Tour and Sergeant Pepper and Revolver and Rubber Soul. Those albums were all around. So I remember listening to those records and learning how to use a turntable when I was a little kid. And so I used to put records on and read the record sleeves, look at the photos, and think like, who are the Beatles and who's John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and where is England? you know, those kinds of things. But I think that was maybe the beginnings of me wanting to be a musician. But I just didn't know it then. But I was definitely taken by the music, and it got my imagination going. And the fact that there was always music in the house, and
Mhm.
also my mom played piano, so the piano was around, the guitars were around. So that was my habitat growing up. So that's kind of a cool little fun memory.
Yes, and it's very, very different from how it was for me
Hmm.
because there was not much music around, and certainly no musicians around in my family.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
Where exactly are you from in Germany? The north, was it?
um Well, yeah, it's difficult to say. It's sort of like in more or less in the middle of Germany, like
Hmm.
the western side of the middle,
Okay.
and it's a town called Lippstadt where I was born and where I went to school, and
Okay.
um, very much like uh, kind of even difficult to explain for me what kind of class was most represented there, and like working class or whatever. I guess so.
Yeah.
Um, but I had like my parents, they sent me to good schools, or at least what they thought would be good schools, and
Yeah.
so I was lucky, and they supported me, always supported me, especially when it came to music and going to music school and stuff. But so for some reason, they had some sort of sense that it may be good for me, even though they don't have any musical training, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, so but for you to be, I mean, because I see you as a person who is really sort of like a representative of music on this planet, sort of like I don't know, like a almost like a uh, I don't want to use the word diplomat because that's sort of
Diplomat.
ambassador, right?
I
Like
like
that's the
that.
word, I
I like
guess.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and and
Ambassador.
and the ambassador of love.
Yeah.
And I think it's really it can be difficult to you know with words to explain. You are really just like such a um, uniquely inspired person when it comes to music, right? Like you pick up the instrument and somehow it's just like it's the only thing you ever do, and that is actually true, right? Almost like
Almost. Yeah.
um, and yeah, so tell me about how like this early childhood then kind of played out in the real world. Let's say once you went going to like you going to school, college, and etc.
Well, I think going back to childhood, because lately I've been chatting to a number of people as well, just about these early days, because I think there's a spark that
Hmm.
happens for a lot of people, and that we hang on to the spark, from our earliest days. And my earliest memories, like listening to those Beatles records, I mean that's huge, but also I remember, how I used to play. And when I would play by myself, usually by myself, or in the early days, it might be with toys or trucks or whatever I was doing, or in the backyard. But it was always a really creative thing where I would be making things up almost in my head, my imagination. And I could play like that for hours and would have a whole world. So remembering that feeling has moved me forward into music. The idea of just being in the moment and creating something out of nothing,
Mm-hmm.
which we do all the time when we play. It's that same feeling, So that's one of the things that I remember from, childhood, that is still there. The child like internal, whatever it is, consciousness or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to have that, and to touch that and know what that is. You could also say it's like going into the zone, where everything drops away and there's no real thought. You're just doing whatever you're doing. You're present in that moment. But going through grade school and stuff, I just remember, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, finding out about radio, finding out about who the cool rock bands were. I had a guy that sat next to me in grade school, and the first day he came in, he was the only guy with long hair. We were supposed to wear ties, and he wore a tie around his head like a bandana, like Hendrix would do or something. I said, well, this guy's my friend, for sure. And he had a cassette deck you know, he walks into school and he's like, "Hey man, what's up?" I'm like, "Dude, what are you listening to?" He goes, "Black Sabbath." I'm like, "Whoa, what's that?" You know. So he was like one of the first gateways into all this new music and stuff that I got into in sixth or seventh grade. And getting into high school was about the time when I started to learn how to play guitar, and it came to me in a dream. I actually woke up and I was like, wow, I got to call my sister today and see if I can borrow her guitar. And I did that. She goes, yeah, here's a Beatles songbook. These are the only three chords I know. Have fun.
Hmm.
That was the start of that. And I started buying vinyl records and Hendrix and finding Jimi Hendrix and listening to him and saying, how do you do that? So that was, I think that took up all my time in high school. Besides going to school and stuff like that, I was learning the guitar and listening to records and reading Guitar Player magazine and finding out about people like John McLaughlin. And who's John McLaughlin? Dude, I got to get his record. And then I'd put it on and go, what is that? So it was a series of what is that? And then
Hmm.
how do you do that? And by the time I was 17, I was probably going to concerts and got to see The Who and Pink Floyd, Animals, and different concerts that were like, wow, how do
Hmm.
you do that? That's what I want to do. So that's where it all started. I think teenage years, it started putting everything in motion, a lot of learning and discovery, but really ultimately, like even now, I'm still learning and discovering. It just
Yeah.
never has ended. I think that might have answered some of the question.
Yeah, no, but we're gonna go deeper. I hope. Uh, is Has there ever been like any other instrument you were like seriously interested in?
Well, besides guitar, I mentioned the piano was in my house, so I always would sit there and play. And I used to write things on it. I kind of transferred my knowledge of guitar chords, and I would say, okay, well, if this is a G on a guitar, then what would be the notes on the piano? So I kind of self-taught early on, at least enough to be able to play chords and arpeggios and find different chords. And then I started discovering chords that you could play on the piano that you couldn't play on the guitar. So I think that changed my ear in a way,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
um, and made me want to find those kinds of chords on a guitar. How would I do that? Maybe using open strings and stuff like that. So keyboards definitely interested me and still do, even though I primarily play guitar. I think I've in some way sonically have figured out ways to make keyboard sounds through the guitar, and even using guitar synthesizer over the last 20 years has been a part of that too. I think the
Hmm.
knowledge from piano and keyboards and harmony, that you would get on a keyboard has transferred to sonic ways of thinking about doing that through the guitar. Yeah.
So let's jump to the present. So when you play now, you sit down and improvise. Is how is like most of what you do then? Is that kind of like how is that represented in your senses? Do you actually uh, is playing mostly a physical thing for you and listening, or is there something in between? Is there some sort of like thinking about also like which notes to pick uh, or a specific?
Yeah, I think if I'm improvising and I get into the zone, which is the whole point, where everything drops away and I'm playing, I'm really not thinking about um, what I'm playing by that point. You might start out that way, like I'm in C major or something,
Hmm.
but usually at some point you have no idea where you are. You're just inside the music. That's how I feel anyway. And
Hmm.
when it's really on, I think it's a deep listening that's happening. And I feel like the music almost becomes spherical. It's like a three-dimensional experience for me. And I'm sitting inside of the sound.
Hmm.
And whatever that means, like if I'm playing guitar, manipulating effect pedals and looping, there's something happening, and I'm merely letting it come through and trying to be out of the way. If I start thinking about something, I feel like it drops away and it's gone. you know
Hmm.
and maybe then you rely on craft and you can play something, but when the real stuff is coming through, those are what our records are, like Rapture. you know
Hmm.
that record is a great example of things coming through us. And I don't think we could have ever conceived that record or talked about, like, let's make that record. It happened. That record happened. We curated what we released, but um, those are the special zones that went down on those records. So that's kind of how I feel about improvisation. And painting too. Painting's very much like that. If I'm really thinking about what I'm trying to do, they're nice gestures in
Hmm.
color,
Hmm.
but the moment that I'm lost in the color, um, and there's no conscious thought that I'm aware of, I'm just being or doing. That's when the paintings happen. Like this cover, this one,
Hmm.
that was a realization. It just happened. I'm like, wow, I can't touch this. you know I just knew it was done. But other times you might be painting for a long time and nothing's popping through.
Hmm. Hmm.
So always looking for the magic in that way. And it's something about getting yourself out of the way for me.
Yes. And I mean, I know what you're talking about because I do the same thing, even though I
Yeah,
may do it differently. I
yeah,
I don't know, but
definitely
it's
do.
it's it's interesting. Like let's talk about that more, and let's like maybe find out how that works for each of us, because
Yeah,
it's one of the big questions. Like when like the older I get, right? Like you could say the less I know. Yes, that is true, but also the more I know.
yeah,
It's a kind of interesting. It seems like a contradiction, and like, but when a lot of the people who are kind of like starting out in music, or who don't have much experience but who have this love for music and start discovering it, there is this, sometimes there seems to be this wall for them that they need to scale in order to, they believe they have to scale the wall and get to the other side in order to be able to make music or to improvise, or and I think that that is absolutely wrong. I think there's no reason why you don't need any particular skills to bring music into the world.
that's right.
And even if you think about like the skills that are useful, even those are not rocket science, right? Like everything can be explained like in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
You can explain, like, you need to make sure that your body can kind of like respond to what you need to do physically, right? So, and that's why you practice to
yep,
put your fingers down, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, etc., right? It's and then you can explain music theory maybe in 45 minutes. Right, it's true. I think it's really nothing that needs to be studied for such a long time. But I still remember in my own world that I had this sort of view that it was something that was difficult to attain rather than easy. and
yeah.
and so what you're saying about the zone, I think,
The ultimate.
is the ultimate, but it's also like the ultimate moment where where you're just who you are, where you're not asking the question, am I capable of responding, because you're simply responding, right?
That's well said. Yeah. And starting out, and not knowing anything on the guitar, but being able to put your fingers down and find some kind of music, you can create music. And it's just as valuable and or valued as if you knew what you were doing. Like the idea of the primitive guitarist, um, who can just make a noise. That's amazing. That's personal expression. So yeah, no matter where you are in the line, the beginning or nearer at the end, you're still expressing that moment.
Well, I know that in at least in recent years, and let's say like maybe the last 10, maybe even 20 years in your life, um, I don't know about the time before, so maybe we should talk about that later. But I know that you have been like looking for these situations where you could play, where you could improvise with other people, where you could play for other people, like the
Yeah,
music for for dancers that you're doing, like live improvised music with
yeah,
dance, and so you're sort of like creating these situations in which you can um, explore the zone, let's say, right, getting into the zone, right? So it's almost, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost a little bit of a high that you're actually looking for. It's like kind of like a little bit of a fix even, right?
yeah.
I mean, at least for me it is. Like when I get to your place and sit down, right there where you are in that in the basement, and we start playing together, that's heaven, paradise.
It is. It is. And and it's collaborative, which is even better. Like playing solo is cool, but I can play solo with dancers, but I'm not alone because I just see the dancers as like notes, you know,
Hmm.
or phrases, and they're moving, and it directly causes me to react in some way musically, and it feeds back to them, and they
Hmm.
hear that. If I'm bending notes, they're bending. They might start bending more because I'm bending notes wider, and it's amazing. So it's a feedback loop that's a really incredible thing to be a part of. Yeah. So yeah, it is a high, and it's that thing that we're trying to get to all the time. I think as artists or as musicians, that point where we're just lost in the act of doing, or being at the highest level we can be in, hopefully, and also trying to push a little further, maybe, but not literally. It's just happening because you're getting deeper into it as you go. It's something like that.
Yeah, what I love about that state is that the rules don't apply anymore when you are in the zone, especially if you're in the zone with other people.
Yeah,
Like nothing, and this was one of the early experiences I had with playing with Bernhard Wüstheinrich,
yeah,
where like he was doing stuff where like my trained uh, musical ear was saying, okay, no, that doesn't work. Then I realized, well, yeah, it shouldn't work, but it does work. How does he do that? Right. So because I come from more of a classical music background and training, right?
yeah,
And then playing with Bernard, who doesn't have any musical training, um, was fascinating. But then something like the Rapture sessions that you mentioned, where like there's no consideration whatsoever of the materials we use. Like it's right. Like
yeah,
I don't even try to match anything that's there,
yeah,
but somehow it happens. Like they
yeah,
as if like these layers that we're putting on top of each other, they sort of like start connecting. They have so much texture that they start connecting in places that we can't even
yeah.
describe, right?
I think that album in particular, there's a couple moments in my life that I've felt that, and I get it occasionally solo, but it's a whole other world when it's collaborative. And when we did Rapture, the only way I can describe what happens on that album is it's a sphere of music, or it's three dimensional, and it's not like this, but it actually, you know, all that music is happening, and we could literally play anything, you
Yeah.
know, but we were listening very deeply, and we were inside of the music. But there were things that were happening, like this note that I created is somehow finding an intervallic relationship with your notes, but there's multiple intervallic relationships happening, and multiple keys, and just the most beautiful harmonies I've ever heard, that just took on a whole different meaning of what music is to me, you
Hmm.
know. And it's
Hmm.
it's happened also in Bandit 65. with Kurt, and I remember I think we were playing in France somewhere one time, and the music, it just went like this, and it
Mm-hmm.
was like this huge sphere. That's how I perceived it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was playing, we're all listening and playing stuff. And Kurt was playing some wild stuff over there, and I was playing wild stuff here, and Gintis was playing all this stuff. And somehow it was all working. There was no way you could make it not work because it was just coming through and we were expressing it all. And I don't think any of us were thinking, it was just allowing. And
Mm-hmm.
it was three-dimensional. And I was kind of shaken by that night, and Rapture too. It was just like, wow, that was some of the most special music I've ever experienced, you know, in real time.
Yes. And I mean, you are, as you said already, you're also painting,
Yeah,
and so that's another medium that you're using there. Um, I'm just sometimes I'm starting to wonder, like these absolutely transcendental experiences we have with music,
yeah,
like how can we share those um, with people who don't want to listen to the music, if that makes any sense. Like I know that the people who kind of listen to the music that we record, they sort of get some sense of what is happening, and some of them get it, and they enjoy it so much. And but I'm wondering if there's anything about what we do of like, that can be shared in some other way.
yeah. Well, first of all, like just talking about the music, it's that particular album, it's an experience. It's not, to me anyway, it's not like listening to music, or it's not even like listening to an ambient record or something that you might have on. Maybe you're doing yoga to ambient music or something, But this is a real experience, and I've experienced that album driving, which is
Mhm,
pretty difficult because it pulls you in and you still have to operate the car,
mhm,
but
mhm,
majestic sunsets going down and listening to Rapture, and it's just wrapping around you. And it's like, wow, it's more of a cinematic experience for me. I imagine, if we could ever find just an amazing cinematographer to do a movie, that
mhm,
somehow expresses that music, that could come in communion, that would be a great way to experience that music.
mhm.
So I see it very cinematically, um, and super spacious, and vistas, and landscapes that are just you've never seen before. So it's a visual album to me, and yeah, I mean, I think that's how I would want to express it visually. Could it be expressed as a painting? I'm not sure, because I mean, it could be. Someone like Samantha Keeley Smith could probably do an amazing painting that would reflect Rapture. I'm not sure if
Mhm,
I could. Uh, you know,
mhm, mhm.
the three-dimensional aspect of that music, is what I'm talking about. So
Yeah, what I'm thinking about maybe goes even one step further, where it's basically about the process that we embark on creating music like that, and
yeah,
like how can we share that, right? And I, in a way, I'm asking this question while I'm already working on an answer, as I have been passing on information. I've been teaching for many years,
yeah,
so. And I sometimes come across people who tell me that there are certain things that can't be taught or can't be
yeah,
passed on. And I've started to realize that I think what they mean is that you can't pass things on if you are not considering your work as being like, or being in the role of some sort of therapist, right? like because that's like you can be a teacher and you can say, okay, I have this kind of like these materials and this stuff, and you can learn that, and I tell you what to do, and like if you do it, you do it. If you don't do it, you don't do it, and it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
But you can also get into a relationship where it's like, and this is more what I see about at least how I make my music is like I start to take responsibility for the somehow for the recipient, the listener, to kind of like start something within them that sort of carries the creative spark kind of I- carries over to that person, and it is inspiring, right? That's kind of what I'm hearing, and that's what was always interested me in music. And for me, it was also the Beatles. It was the White Album, and I was maybe three, and I put it on the turntable, right? And and there was something about it that was not just the sound, it was not that the music, it was that it triggered in me the wish to create.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
inspiring. Yeah.
inspiring, exactly. And so really that's sort of what I see is has become like more important and more apparent to me now in COVID times,
Hmm.
where we don't have the means to inspire people by playing live shows,
Yeah.
but we have to use like even this conversation we're having here is, I hope, will be something that inspires
Yeah.
people.
It's something I've been doing a lot during COVID. I mean, the fact that we're a year in lockdown is
Hmm.
mind blowing to me, but there's been such a beautiful sharing just in general in the creative areas. Lots of musicians talking like this and
Yeah.
sharing so much deep experience and knowledge. And that's been inspiring without a doubt. And it, I think it's caused more of us to give voice to what we do, and have these kinds of discussions, which are really interesting because we're getting to the why. why,
Mm-hmm.
why is this going on? But maybe we shouldn't question it and just keep doing it. But you talked about therapy almost, and I definitely, both in painting and music, I feel that aside from maybe an addiction to doing it or the need to do it, it is a real sense of therapy. And when I'm creating music or taking photographs or painting, I don't think I'm ever thinking of the audience other than myself. I think I'm just, if I see a photograph, like I see a moment that needs to be photographed or documented, it becomes the most important thing right at that moment. Like I have to take this picture now, and I take it. And then I feel better because for some reason, I captured that. Or the same with the painting, just working with color makes me feel better. Even if I don't achieve an actual painting, but the actual process of doing,
Hmm.
is great. Or I might feel like this during the day, but if I can get my hands on a guitar for only 10 minutes and play,
Hmm.
I feel better. So
Hmm.
there's something about, I don't know what that's saying, but there is a therapeutic aspect to doing all of the stuff. And yeah, it's important. And listening to records too, going through the vinyl and pulling something out like, oh man, let's listen to this Tony Williams album. And you put it on, like, wow,
Hmm.
listen to Tony play, man. And it's mind blowing. And all of a sudden another hour's gone by. You know?
Yeah, so you also worked as a radio DJ at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, that was in college days. That was early 80s. I'm not sure when it was, 82 maybe, 83, 82, 83, 84, 85, right around there. And that was at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio.
Mhm.
And I was a music head then, and I still remember walking back and forth past the radio station when I started at school there. And one day I just went in, and it took a lot of courage for some reason just to go in and say hi. And they're like, "Hi, can I help you?" And they're like, "Yeah, is it possible to get a radio show on your station?" And they're like, "Oh, who are you?" And we just talked, and all of a sudden they're like, "Do you like jazz?" I'm like, "Oh, I love jazz." Like, "Do you want to be the jazz director?" That was the first day, and I'm like, "Yeah." So the next thing I know, they're like, okay, see all those boxes there? That's all jazz stuff. So you have to take all that stuff home and listen
Mhm.
and write down and program, the station's jazz content. I'm like, great. And I'm ripping boxes open from ECM and just like, wow, what's this? So it was a huge education to be there and to walk back and see, four walls of vinyl from floor to ceiling,
Mhm.
and just having those years to just dig through there and learn. I learned so much. And also during that time is when I started interviewing artists, um, and doing some stuff for like the school. The school had like a print newspaper, so my interviews would be in that, like with Jean-Luc Ponty or whoever it might be, Alan Holdsworth, people like that. And we had a jazz club in Dayton, Ohio called Jilly's, and I used to spend so much time there seeing Chick Corea and Wynton Marsalis and Branford Marsalis and Adrian Belew and you name it. Everybody came through there. Saw Alan Holdsworth on his first tour there, and Ralph Towner, John Abercrombie. So that was a big time of my life in terms of learning about music, learning about how to play music live, what goes into that, and just such a discovery that still impacts my life, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that you dedicated your whole life to music. And how did you end up in Philadelphia?
Yeah. So I had a girlfriend back in Dayton, Ohio, who was from Pennsylvania, and her brother uh, was a lawyer who wanted to get into entertainment law and managing bands. And so we knew each other, and he called me one day and he's like, "What are you doing after you graduate?" I said, "I have no idea. I just want to make music." And I couldn't figure out a way of doing it in Ohio. It was like I came to like a brick wall, like I don't know what to do. And then he called one day, goes, "Why don't you just move to Philly?" you know, Move to Philly, sleep on my floor, and there's a band that I want to manage, and maybe we can manage bands. So we did that for a short while, So that's what got me to Philly, and then I knew no one here except for him, and I just would venture out every night to clubs. And at that time, I guess that was '86. There were everybody was playing Philly, and you could go to so many different clubs in so many different places. And I still remember going to see Living Color and meeting Vernon Reed,
Hmm.
and hanging out, talking to him. And a friend of mine made these little neon rubber knobs. They were called knobbies. And he goes, "Can you give these to Vernon?" I'm like, "Sure." So I took a baggie filled with knobs. They were like pink, lime green, yellow, really fluorescent, and it was almost like it was like a bag of drugs or something. I'm like, "Vernon, I got these rubber knobs for you." He goes, "Oh, dude," and he was inside the bag, like, "I love these," you know. So it's like through rubber knobs I met Vernon, and been friends ever since then. It's pretty wild. But yeah, so yeah, Philly was a big change in my life. Um, Getting out of Ohio was a huge thing, and then Philadelphia was just like a music mecca. Everything was going on. The industry was still happening, so lots and lots of clubs, lots and lots of jazz, lots of rock. Everything was going on, and so I was pretty much immersed in that. You know,
So that's 35 years in Philly, right?
yeah, I haven't done the math recently. Yeah, long time.
Hmm. And you connected with quite a few people there in the scene, and you like really for me, the like the music or the kind of stuff that you were doing kind of starts in the early 2000s, like stuff that like early stuff on your album that I
Yeah,
sort of like know, but I really don't know what you did before that. So
yeah.
between mid 80s and late 90s, what was your main activity then, musically speaking?
Yeah. Well, I got married was one thing that happened in 1990, and you know, my main activity at that point really was discovering who I was as a
Mhm,
musician, and taking that more seriously, like uh, starting the beginnings of a recording idea and starting the idea of writing songs, writing lyrics, exploring that. And wow, that whole period of time was really interesting because I had no idea about anything except um, just going to create these songs and learn how to record. And so that was a huge learning process, shifting from just making music and playing
mhm,
to writing, composing, writing lyrics, and then how do I record this stuff so I can send it to somebody? That was
mhm,
like the idea then. And so I think it was more like research and development for me. It was a lot of these things didn't go out to anybody except the people that worked, like Barry Meehan. We worked together and still do, obviously. But we wrote songs together and played and, learned about drum machines and recorders and DAT machines and reel to reels back in those days, and all the different formats. And I think that brings me up to, somewhere around mid 90s, 96, 97, where a big thing changed in my life, which was I met Jafar Barron, who's a trumpet player. And I met him at this jazz club in Philly called Ortlieb's. And I knew about him, and I said, "Man, I'd love to play with you sometime." He goes, "Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Why don't you come down to Silk City tonight? Just bring your guitar and amp. We're playing, so come down." So I go down there, and it was like just immediate chemistry. I was in this amazing band, and King Britt was the DJ.
mhm,
And it was a big
mhm,
party, and
mhm,
we would do a set, and then there'd be a DJ set, and then we'd play, and then a DJ set. Next thing I know, this connection there just connected me to this whole new universe of musicians and tied me in with Jazzy Jeff, DJ Jazzy Jeff, who had a studio, and I kind of became the house guitar player there for a while.
mhm,
And he was under contract with Sony, so they were producing lots of records for Sony, R&B albums like Kenny Lattimore and Jill Scott, and then I got in kind of like the universe of the Roots, with Questlove and James Poyser. And one day James Poyser called me and he was like, you know, I think I would like you to audition for this band called Les Nubians. They're from Paris. And
mhm,
I'm like, sure, I would love to check it out. And I checked out the music. I'm like, this is cool. So that turned out to be my first world tour working with them, and just an amazing experience. And then also I was working with King Britt at that time, and King Britt, was doing stuff for Rope a Dope, and he was, doing all kinds of records. So I was like his guitar player, and
mhm,
we ended up doing tons of remixes, and eventually we did the Sister Gertrude Morgan album for Rope a Dope. And I mean, it was just a swirling amount of stuff that all started from saying to Jafar, "Hey, we got to play together sometime," you know.
mhm,
And then in that same universe, as all this was unfolding for a year or so, then I met Ursula Rucker, and
mhm,
that was through a King Britt project, Silk 130. And we played the Theater of Living Arts in Philly, and Ursula was on that show. And we met and stayed in touch, or I stayed in touch with her, and eventually, I started working with Urs, and that became 18 years of world touring.
mhm,
So it's like I love all these magical connections that kind of go down, or at least they did with my life, and still do. When I met Bernd Friedman because of touring with Ursula, that led to making records with him and Jackie Liebezeit as well as David Sylvian. So
yes.
there are all these magical little
You also met me as a Ursula Rocker show.
that was. Can you tell me when that was? Was that 2005?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
2005 or 2006.
We met via MySpace, I think.
Yes. Yes.
You know, And I remember you asking me where we were playing, and you said you would come to Munich.
Mhm.
And there you were. My memory is that you were wearing like a long leather jacket that went below your knees. And that I was like, wow, there's the guy out there that looks like Darth Vader. That must be Marcus. It was amazing. And we met that night, and I remember we had a rough show sonically. It was really
Mhm.
not a fun show to play because the sound wasn't right. So it's one of those shows we had to battle through to get through the show. But I was like, oh, Marcus heard us on a night like this. Darn. I think it was still great.
Yeah, it was with Gintas.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and like it's fascinating to hear this story now because I think I even saw you at Silk City once. You took me to Silk City,
Oh, yeah.
and you were playing, and yeah, and there is like one other gig that I remember, which was like there was torrential rain and it was supposed to be like in some backyard, the band, and then the band set up in the like in the throughway, like the tunnel going to the backyard.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
That was with Questlove, I
that
believe.
was with Questlove, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Wow. Great memory.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, I have very bad memory. Unfortunately, I would love to be much better at recalling things.
Was that
Like
2008?
must have been around that time because I can't remember now, but we can look it up. Like when basically I asked you to join me for the Stars End
Yeah.
performance that I did, right? That
Yeah.
must have been 2008, I think. So,
That was the
but
first time that you came to Philly, right? And that at least when we were together.
yeah, yeah, no, I had been to Chuck Van Zyl's show as
Yeah.
early as 2002 or something, but yeah, yeah, and that was like what I love about you also is like there's like this multicultural kind of aspect to what you do, which I think is also something that's completely like kind of non-existent for me coming from Germany, like
Yeah.
this contact with um, like a certain kind of world music, let's say, like for lack of I don't like that term actually, but you know what I mean. Um, and like it seems like whenever I meet you and I play with you, there's this sort of almost like a well of knowledge that is kind of like not it's not situated in one place, right? It seems to me like you're drawing the inspiration from all sorts of directions at all times. So for example, talking about you, I remember when you started doing the prepared guitar stuff more
Yeah.
often, like you always used to do it occasionally, but then there was a time when that became like a major thing,
Yeah.
and it's just a fascinating like these and I think it really goes back like I mean like if people would see your upstairs room with the record collection and like
Yeah.
like it's obvious that you have all of these amazing influences and you actually took the time to listen to that music, right? And you
Yeah.
listen to albums more than once, so it's not like you are the uh, like that they're like the prototypical like music journalist who listens to an album once and writes a review, and it's not like that. um yeah, and so with Ursula, um and how would you describe what she does for people who don't know what she does?
Well, first of all, Ursula is, you know, we're connected in some kind of just amazing way. And the first time we played together, it was immediate chemistry. It was just like, she is an amazing poet. Um, and most people that haven't heard of Ursula have heard Ursula, and generally they've heard her on the first, I believe it's three Roots albums. The first three Roots albums, she did the poems that end each of those records, and she became known because of that. Um, and then she got signed to K7. That's when I kind of came around at that time. And the first album was Super Sister. And Super Sister is like, you know, her first foray, her first album, and we were all part of the making of that record. King Britt and myself and Phil Charles, and just just amazing people, and it's just this amazing record. And she, what can I say about Ursula? She is like, for me, like a voice of our time, and we're lucky to hear what she has to say and has to write. So, you know, you can investigate her albums, on streaming services or something, or go to her Facebook page or her
Hmm.
Twitter account and just see her daily notes and the things she's dropping. I actually just did an interview with her last week.
Yeah, I saw some parts of it.
Was just a beautiful conversation, and for us, again, we hadn't played in a little while, and then with the pandemic happening, we're just like, just can't wait to play together again, because it's such a unique thing that happens when we're together. It's like I play in a certain way when I'm with her, and we just get to this beautiful place. But anyway, we toured for 18 years together, and had so many amazing experiences that still resonate. I mean, it's life changing stuff, really. And
Hmm.
Ursula's this amazing poet, singer, activist, community leader. I mean, she's doing things to help, you know, and if you're a bad guy, she'll call you out, you know.
Hmm.
So she's been gifted this amazing voice, and she's utilizing it, you know, while she's here on this planet. That's her gift, and that's her way through. So it's a blessing that we're aware of her and that we know her.
Hmm. Hmm. So even, well, not even, but there you can also see the theme that you are sort of like connecting musically with people who use a different medium to express themselves. You said like
Yeah, yeah,
poetry, right?
yeah.
And so yeah, this may be stupid to ask, but I ask it anyway. Okay, so um, the music you played, and I hopefully you will still play with Ursula. How much of it is improvised?
With Ursula.
Yes.
Well, here's the thing with Urs. We were talking about this in our interview the other day. The first gig we had was opening up for Nina Simone at the Tower Theater, and
Hmm.
that was going to be my debut working with her, just me and Urs.
Hmm.
So I remember her manager saying, here's the songs you have to learn. And I put the records on. I still remember sitting on my wood floor at my old house and putting on like a song. And I'm like, wow, I have to learn how to play this. And they were full band productions, but
Hmm.
I had to distill that somehow down to just guitar. And so that was kind of like the beginning, and, just trying to do that challenge of doing that. And then we did a rehearsal, and somehow that all coalesced and it worked, and we had this connection. What was the question, though? I think I got off on a
Yeah,
tangent.
no, no, no. It's is there in how far were you? Can you kind of respond musically in an improvisational way?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I learned these songs, and my feeling about, I was looking for the code within each song that kind of like, what's the essence that I can distill it down to the guitar, and maybe I'll have to use a looper as well to build it. So once I found that code, then I found like, okay, this is the form, or this is the architecture, bare bones, just the ribs, and I was trying to just get the ribs together and then add the flesh, so to speak,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
to give those songs what it had to have. It's almost like stripping it down to the blues, the essential bits. And then Ursula's voice would come in that, and we would have this form, But what ended up happening the more we played together is we always played the form more or less, but we improvised with it every single night. You know, some nights it might have been faster or slower or longer or shorter. But
Mhm.
once you had the initial structure, what happened in there, the color or the orchestration of it was always improvised. So I always felt like we improvised every night with the material. We played with the material. So that's what happened, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still remember that show in Munich, which you said didn't sound so good, and I believe you.
At least on stage. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But I still remember how impressed I was. You know, it was almost like witnessing a uh, new art form,
Uh,
new to me. I'm saying, right?
yeah.
And it was fascinating, and sort of like the yeah. You said that you were using loopers and stuff, but
Yeah.
what you just described as the like the bare bones, right? That's kind of like what I I'm starting to realize is maybe like the most fascinating skill that a musician can have.
Mm.
Like how can you represent that full band arrangement
Yeah.
playing two notes, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Or a bass line or,
yeah.
you know, um, and I really felt that that trio with Gintis, me and Ursula at that time, and you recognized it as a new form. I feel that we were like the blueprint for what was to come later, but
Mhm,
I really felt that was one of the greatest bands of the time, while we were out there doing it. We sounded like an entire band, really. And it was me and Gintis doing the music, and Ursula was, at the front of the stage and doing her poetry and singing. And we really discovered a lot, through that whole process, of touring. And
mhm.
yeah, it was special. It still is special.
You have your own label, 1K Recordings,
Yeah.
and when did you start that label?
Started at roughly around 1999. I think 97 was some of the first recordings, and that was Jazz Heads, a band I had with Ari Honig and Chris Kuzmi, and Ben Bacardo was the bassist. And we were playing a lot of gigs at the time. And I don't know, I think it must have been my growing up with albums and being in the radio station and the idea of documenting the music. And around 97 or so, I really was into the idea of documenting live gigs and recording. I was reading Wire magazine a lot, and I was always in the back of the magazine looking at all these little labels that had ads. I'm like, never heard of any of these bands. Who are these people? And
Mhm,
maybe there'd be a review. I used to read the reviews in Wire magazine too, and I've never heard of any of those people. Of course, there were some people I heard of, but it's a lot of avant-garde musicians. So Wire turned me on to a lot of stuff. But I always used to think like, who are these people? But then it got to the point of, wow, so they're releasing their music, um, and maybe it's very small in
mhm,
terms of number of CDs sold or whatever, but they're documenting it and they're making it available. And that very concept hit my mind one day, and I was like, I just started making a list of possible projects that I would like to do.
mhm,
And Jazz Heads being one. And I had a band called Fractured Reverb Underground, which was an electronic project. And eventually there was a group called New Cultures, which was myself, Ellie Perez, and Barry Meehan, and we were all contributing songs and working together, and I was producing it all. And
mhm,
it was just having really a fun time with it, with the idea of can create stuff and release it on your own label. And I really didn't have any thought about, I'm going off here. I
yeah.
really didn't have any thought about trying to get any of this stuff on a record label. It was more of the idea of like making it available. I don't even know how to turn this off, unfortunately, but
It's pretty loud.
I'm sure it is. I'm so sorry. But it kind of started with that, with just the pure idea of creating music,
Mhm.
recording it, mastering it, doing all the artwork, and making CDs and sending them to WXPN or the jazz stations or whatever for some airplay, and that we were out playing in the clubs locally, and that's how it started. And it was just a little grassroots friends thing, really. So that was the initial idea.
It's an honor for me to be associated with you and also your label. And um, it's 2021, right? And thinking back, I've met you in 2006, and so like it was really early days in a way for your label also.
Yeah, it was.
Um, and I remember you giving me those first records that you put out, and I love them all. And like for me, the standout album still is the Soft Lunch album.
Yeah, Tilomo.
Yes, um, this is a true story. So I used to live in Innsbruck back then, right?
Oh yeah.
And I had an iPod, and I used to play music, like I used the shuffle mode on the iPod. And like I can't remember, like 15,000 tracks on the iPod or something like that. And this is true. This is true. Like occasionally some music comes on, and I kind of like don't recognize it, or I don't know exactly what it is. I say, what is this? It's unbelievable. It's great. Kilomo. Okay. So 3 days later, right, I hear some other track. No, wow, what's this? Oh, Kilomo. It's that album. I can't, I really recommend it. It's incredible. And these, I heard you say, maybe in another interview some time ago, that was like your first, like sort of like real experimental guitar album, like where you were going into that direction.
Yeah, because it was also about that time was the first time I had Ableton Live. So that software just arrived. And so that album really, I was working with dancers at the time. So there's some dance influenced music on there and conceptual music, but there's a lot of me discovering Ableton for the first time and
Oh.
certain plugins and like, wow, this does this. It was, I called it a guitar and laptop album, but there was actually Wurlitzer piano on there and some other things. Jeremy Carlstead actually plays drums on one track called Galid, and
Mhm.
on Galid, I took his drum performance and I just mutated it and had a lot of fun. That's why I call it source drumming because I
Mhm.
really mutated what he originally presented, and that was one of the ideas I think at the time, which is still a cool thing to do. But at the time, it was like we could get in and take the source material and mangle it in some kind of way, and it was also I was working with drum machines and rhythms and new stuff. It was just part of the materials of the day, I think, that was all around. And I remember King Britt saying the same thing that you just said, that, like he still to this day loves Tilomo. And the
Mhm.
fact that I never did another record like that is so interesting, but I never say never. I've been
Mhm.
working on some new experiments lately, which is really fun. So we'll see if there's another Tilomo that comes out. But that was just again, I think that record was improvisational and of its time and of its moment, and I was just thoroughly invested in that music, and it seemed to register with a lot of people. So that's great. Still stands up, I think.
Yeah. When was that album released? Do you remember which year it was?
2005, I do remember that. The way that album actually started was when I was touring with Ursula. Stefan Struver, who was A&R with K7 at the time, signed Ursula, and we kind of became buds at that during those years. And there was one tour that he knew that I was doing like experimental guitar, and he's like, Tim, I think you should make an ambient record for our label. I'm like, oh, I'd love to do that. So it was very low key, and he goes, yeah, send me some tracks soon. So I went to work. That's really how that album started, because it was, he kind of offered the idea of a label deal. So I
Hmm.
sent him all the tracks, and then something had changed at the label or something. He goes, yeah, we can't really do an album like this right now.
Hmm.
Maybe it
Hmm.
didn't fit on the kind of stuff that they were doing.
Hmm.
So then I just put it out on 1K. That's what happened.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know how many releases you have so far on the label?
Yeah. With the next release, there'll be 50.
Amazing. And what's the next release?
The next release is my first vocal solo album called Many Ways Around the Sun. That is if it comes out on 1K. We'll see. I'm letting a few people listen to it right now. So you never know.
Yeah,
But
I'm so sad that I didn't get to play on that record.
no one got to play on that record.
I know.
But
That's why.
it was I don't know, it was a journey in isolation, and I just ended up playing everything, and all the songs on that record just came through. Like I couldn't move fast enough in the studio, grabbing mics and pulling them over to cymbals and just trying to capture everything while it was happening. And it was like a you know, the demos became the record, so to speak. It's like I had to get them down, and they were coming through sometimes with lyrics and everything. And I couldn't move fast enough in the studio. I needed help, but I ended up doing it all myself. And the studio was just an amazing. It was so destroyed, like you wouldn't believe, all the cables and all the microphones and drums and cymbals and guitars and basses and keyboards, and I had a Mellotron down here, and all this stuff was everywhere. And it was, I should have taken some photos of that time, because it was just total chaos. But the album turned out really, really nice. So I'm excited about it.
How long was the process of recording it? Was it just a few days or a few weeks or?
Over time, yeah, because it started before the pandemic, probably. I'm thinking maybe in December, something like that. I remember my girlfriend and I, Karen, we went and saw The Fix. I
Mhm,
think it was not this past December, but
mhm,
2019. And Fix played in New York, and their opening act, whose name I cannot remember, unfortunately, he sang a Todd Rundgren song.
mhm,
Um, and I was like, wow, that's a great song. But I didn't recognize it as Todd, but I knew the song. And so we got back to the house, and Karen was also talking about the song, and she said, you should, I'd love to hear you sing that song. And so
mhm,
I learned the song,
mhm,
and I sang it to her, and she was like, "Oh my God, that sounds
mhm.
so good." And I'm like, "Wow, I don't know." But something sparked, and there was a lot of you know inspiration in the air. Let's just say that. And these songs started coming up, and I was just playing acoustic guitar, and there'd be a new song idea, and then some of them were coming out fully formed, and I just started recording them. I remember some of them were recorded on a Saturday. I used to have these languid Saturdays down here with microphones everywhere, and sometimes I would just start, and I'd get a full working take, say on acoustic guitar, and then I'd do an overdub on the voice, and it would start taking shape, and I'd add bass, and I would play bits of the drum. I'd play just the kick drum, or I'd play the snare drum, or the hi hat, or the cymbals, or shakers, or whatever it was, and I just build up these tracks, and all of a sudden there's this wobbly song sitting there. I'm like, wow, this is so amazing, and I was so excited about it. And so that they kind of just went on like that, over many weeks, I would say. Yeah, I don't have any recollection of the full time period, but
Mhm.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden there was something there, and I sent the the working demos, what I thought were the demos, or the produced idea, to a friend of mine, Brian Boland, who's an amazing producer and mix engineer. And he played the record, my demo or my reference mixes, and he called me back that night. He's like, "Dude, this is your hunky dory." And he goes, "I would love to mix this record." I'm like, "Let's go." And so then there was that whole process of the back and forth and listening to his mixes, and he's just a brilliant mixer. So we had a good time, and he got all of that stuff into really good shape, you know. So I can't wait for you to hear it.
Yeah, I have to admit that I envy you for that experience, and also I'm jealous. Um, it's sort of like what I would hope would, happen to me at least once again in my life, something like that.
A vocal record.
No, just not necessarily vocal, right? Could be, but just the way that inspiration struck
Ah,
you, right?
yeah,
And where you have the opportunity to kind of like play everything yourself and
yeah,
sort of like create these, um, because like, this is something that maybe some people don't understand. I think like when you work with looping technology, it's something very different from using multi-track recording.
absolutely.
It's not the same thing, not at all, even though like the pedals are being sold that way sometimes, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So that it's like, you can multi-track yourself. But and I find this idea that you kind of create a record like Stevie Wonder did, like in the
yeah,
early 70s, right? That's sort of like almost like the ultimate artistic expression for a musician. If
yeah,
you're a producer and songwriter and performer for all the parts and singer, right? It's
yeah.
incredible. It's incredible. I can't wait to hear it. Really can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, and it's a departure too in some ways. But now the more I hear it, it's like I'm not sure it's a departure, but if people are expecting like it's going to be, some kind of soundscape record with vocals, it's not that. It's,
Mhm.
straight up songs, and a lot of the songs deal with love, and a lot of songs deal with, expressing that of what is, like this moment in time on the planet where we are and our consciousness, and you know where love is the answer, that kind of record. It's like some of these songs were birthed on a Saturday. I used to, as a kid, have a feeling about listening to music and being in the park on a Saturday, and it was just like the sun's out and just beautiful and everything is possible. And I think this record kind of has some of that feeling to it. It sparkles.
There's a track or two on the New Cultures album or on the remix album. I can't remember where you're singing also, and
Both records, yeah.
yeah, and so that's why I have some sort of idea what your voice sounds like and also what your songwriting, I mean, may have changed completely, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
those are also two albums that I've really enjoyed a lot, and they have something really beautiful about them. I find this fascinating because I spoke with Richard Barbieri also,
Oh,
and just figuring out like or understanding how like we are sort of like all connected without even knowing about each other, and like we recognize each other through the music.
yes. That's how we get to know one another.
Yes,
Like you feel like you know the person because you've heard the record.
yes.
Hmm.
And but then and I find this, but then I get to know you, and so maybe I have not heard everything you've ever done, like, and then suddenly I hear the New Cultures album and I go, oh my god, that's also Tim. Unbelievable, right? And I'm pretty sure that's gonna be what I will be thinking when I hear your new album.
I hope so, man. But ultimately, you know, it's like, who knows what motivates us and drives us to do this stuff, but it is part of flow, and it came out, and and somehow I recognize it. I
Mm.
recognize me in it, and I really look forward to hearing what you think when you do hear it. But yeah, I think new cultures may give you some clue about
Hmm.
what it might be like.
Hmm.
Yeah,
You know, the reason why I maybe sounded a little bit negative about myself there, saying that I would, wish to do something like that again or get an opportunity to do something like that is because right now, or even for, even for a few months, I felt really empty and not in a good way.
yeah,
Um,
I
and
understand that too.
and it's not a problem for me because I have been doing so much work, and I know that if I do work, it's always good or good enough, right? But like what you described, so that this real drive to do something, and like almost like this obsessive wish to create, and also to challenge oneself, right?
Yeah,
Um, that is something that I'm kind of missing, and in the
yeah,
current climate and with the like the constant hustling I have to do in order to survive,
yeah,
it's really destructive. You could say on one side it's destructive. I think it's going to be also constructive in some way, and
yeah,
instructive, and also creative.
yeah.
um, but it's sort of like the sort of diversion that I really didn't expect. It's like this process. Well, we know that as artists, as people, we kind of like reinvent ourselves in regular intervals almost, like, but it felt like I was in a process of like halfway through a process of reinvention, and then that got cut off,
Yeah.
and now there's something else. And um, I would love to be able to be there with you in that studio and just play right now. And
I would love that too. Well, it will happen
yeah,
at some point,
yeah,
and I really look forward to any time that we can play again, even if we play online somehow. That would be
yeah.
wonderful.
Let's do that. I
Just be connected and talking to you makes me feel good, and that's what I've been finding during the lockdown, the ability of talking to other people, and we are being connected. Like, I work with dancers this way, where I'm playing guitar, and it's going into a gigantic Zoom classroom with the choreographer and all these little squares, and in each square there's a dancer, from their house,
It's amazing.
and they're responding even though we're on a delay.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
playing,
Hmm.
and I see them responding to what I'm playing, and I'm responding to what they're doing, and they're feeling that, and even there we connect somehow. um, it's so profound, and it's a blessing too. But you know it's great that we have the internet during this time, that we can actually share this information and share emotion and friendship and all those things. Thankful for that. So why not creativity?
Yeah, yeah, like I recorded a couple of like maybe even 3 albums with Mark Wingfield on a Zoom call,
Really?
and yeah, we did, and it works great because with like when you're not trying to play in time with each other, when you're not even attempting to do that, and you
Yeah,
just play with each other, like you hear what you hear, right?
yeah,
So it works. It
yeah.
works. It's been interesting. So we can do that as well. I was
Oh, that's
thinking to maybe to do that with more people, like
mm.
get kind of like a bigger group of people together and do this online session.
And
Uh,
can you do that multi-track?
the way that we do that is like you record your tracks locally,
Oh, I see.
and you can record as many tracks as you want in parallel,
Mm.
but you're sending a mix of that out via a plugin that kind of like transmits your signal onto the internet, and then somebody else, the other people can can um, take another, like a receiver plugin, and put it into their DAW, and then you set that up the other direction as well, and you can do that between many people. And it's, like I said, it's not in sync, and it's also like impossible to kind of like understand um, what the delays are really. And it's sort of, it's almost like complex, like you say, it's that feedback, right, that you're getting when you're playing with others.
Yeah.
It's just there's a delay in between, but it doesn't matter, you don't know what it is, you can't really describe it, right?
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
That's cool. Well, I'd love to try that sometime.
Yeah,
You know, that would be fun.
yeah.
But yeah, getting back to what you were just saying before that with the idea of inspiration, I would have to say though, that during this lockdown, it's definitely been a roller coaster for me as well, and I'm sure that there were many weeks that went by where I was just on the low end of the phase, and
Hmm.
how I felt was I didn't feel like doing anything, you
Hmm.
know, for a while. And um, when inspiration does show up, if it shows up, it could be many factors that cause it to show up. But just the thing that is in your mind or in my mind is just I need to play the guitar. Or I need to go downstairs and work. And sometimes it's just off. You know,
Hmm.
that you're just non-receiving. Um, so I just think it's a wave, and if it's down, it's going to come back up at some point.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Yeah,
and
in the case of my own experiencing, it's a little different though, because I sometimes I have the wish
ah,
to create, but I can't. And that's when it hurts.
yeah, I understand that. One of the things that I've been interviewing a few people as well, or chatting with people, and my show is basically called "Searching for Sparks,"
Hmm.
and I've always loved Steve Hillage, and his song was called "Searching for the Spark."
Hmm.
So it was kind of like that idea, but I've always thought about that title, "Searching for the Spark" or "Searching for Sparks." And the reason I think that's a cool title is because my whole life I've been searching for sparks that will get me inspired. And that might be reading an interview in Guitar Player magazine or Tape Op, or seeing an interview that you did with someone, or there's so many things. I just watched a movie with about Milford Graves called Full Mantis, and you should really watch it.
Hmm.
It's on Amazon Prime right now,
Hmm.
and he just passed. I think February 12th, and he was just an amazing human being. And talk about sparks. You see how this guy lived his life, and it's so inspiring. So I'm always looking for inspiration, looking for greatness, and looking for new ideas. I'm constantly, I feel like I'm sending probes out, looking for something that's going to jumpstart me. It could be reading a book. It could be listening to some new album. One night I was listening to John Lee Hooker from like 1950s, studio recording, and it just blew me out. Um, and the way the records sound, the way the atmosphere of the recording studio sounded, I just ran right down to the studio, and it was instantly working. But so I think that's one way. It's like searching for the spark. Maybe it'll jumpstart something. And that's what I'm always trying to do. Like, what's gonna make me want to go do something? And
Hmm. Yeah.
that could come from love as well. It could come from your girlfriend. It could come, from just taking walks in the woods or nature, or seeing an
Hmm.
amazing sunset. I don't know. And the other thing I've always tried to do is I've always commissioned Sundays as sacred art day. Like, no matter what, Sunday was always like, it's always been a spiritual day for people, right? Church or whatever. And for
Hmm.
me, it was more like the church of art, the church of creation, make music on that day or paint or go to the art museum or, whatever it was, it was always like that was a sacred day for creating or
Hmm.
watching great films or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
So those are some of my methods.
Wonderful. Yeah, inspirational.
Yeah,
Inspirational.
yeah. But man, it's so good to see you, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's making me melancholic a little bit
Why?
because it's like, I would like to be closer to you,
Yeah. Well,
right?
this went down, I think, in 2008, or no, it would have been after that because I would have been at this house. And I remember saying to you, it's like, your best friends, my best friends, it seems like all of my best friends do not live here.
Mhm.
Gintis and Jeremy, they're in New York. You're in Berlin. I have just different friends all over, and I have great friends here in Philly too. But I think I said that to you one time. I felt melancholy too because um, you were going back to Berlin. And I was like, wow, if you lived here or if I lived there, I think we would always be working or we'd have a band going or,
Mhm.
you know, we'd be best friends. But our orbit as best friends is a much wider orbit. Like we might not see each other for months and months. We're always in touch somehow, like on social media, like
Yes. Yeah.
through likes or hellos or whatever. But it seems like our cycle since 2008 has been like, here comes a year and there's a moment, and then the next year. Even Adrian, the last time Adrian Ballou was here, Julie called me up and we were going to go have dinner with Adrian. And Julie's like, "Can you pick Adrian up?" I'm like, "Yeah." I've known Adrian for 20 years, but only from seeing him at concerts. He goes, "Hey, Tim, but he said when I picked him up, he goes, "Yeah, it's been 20 years of getting to know you, one concert at a time." You know,
Mhm.
and now we're finally friends. It's something like that. And and once you're connected, you're always connected. And that's a great thing. So being a musician and creating music like we've created, wow, that's a sacred thing. Even like this record, which I'll never forget this. Yeah, I
Mhm.
brought a copy down.
Mhm.
That album, another one of those special moments, and that was the manifestation of us playing the Stars End show,
Yes.
and then the overdubs from an all-star cast of amazing musicians, and that's a profound record to me.
You see, for some reason, even before I had made these international contacts, I sort of was aware that the people that I'm looking for, let's say, or that my friends, they are not necessarily where I am,
Yeah.
right? And that's also the reason why when I started making music, I was not really looking for local gigs. Also because I was still a student, so I didn't really have to make money from gigging. But so when I put out my first album, which was around the same time that you started your label, so it was in '98. Um, I sent 100 promo copies out into the world, and only two within Germany. Right, that was sort of like the because I had over the years like researched like where are the radio stations that would probably like what I do, and I had sent my album Tasters to Chuck Van Zyl, and he played it, and people still tell me about hearing it on his show, and so it's these, for some reason, and I wonder why that is, or I'm even actually wondering if that's true. Like, why did I know that it would be a waste to try to find people who think like me in my direct vicinity, you know, like it was, it's I found that fascinating. Like, how can you even get the sense? Maybe it's totally arrogant, you know, maybe there would be enough people even here, like in a radius of like a mile, that, you
Yeah,
know, and there probably are. I mean, in Berlin now, right? You know, but
absolutely. But
but
then
in but
not necessarily.
then, yes, yes.
I mean, even in Philly, like, with the music I was creating, always, I was never thinking about Philly. I was
Hmm.
thinking more of like, this is for, Europe or England or something. That was what I was always thinking, because all the people that I loved were not from necessarily the States, And
Hmm.
Philly, I knew the scene in Philly, and I knew the kinds of music that you could kind of do in Philly. Um, and there was one particular venue that I used to play that was a really creative room, and I could just call the booking agent and he would just say, like, I said, I'd love to play there next month. He goes, oh yeah, I have Thursday available. As simple as that. And then you had a gig, and then you could come in that room and do anything you wanted.
Hmm.
And when that place closed, it was like, for me, the a kind of end of the scene, because everything was boxed in then: jazz club, rock club, dance club, but none of the in betweens, which is where I live. The in between. So all the artists I loved were maybe in Europe or Berlin or England or Norway or Japan or something like that.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And and yeah, so I was always looking for that too, Marcus. And that's kind of like, when I was touring with Urs, I was so interested because we'd play festivals sometime, and I'd have an opportunity to meet Bernd Friedman, or I'd have an opportunity to meet some of these people, and those would usually turn into a collaborative thing, and we got to meet, and it absolutely did that, and is still going, you know.
Yes.
So I don't know, just babbling on about
Yeah.
the idea of that, even in our own hometown, you know, we want to expand outward from that, and maybe those musicians are not in your town, you know.
Hmm.
So I think we both kind of have that same
Yeah, for
that
sure.
same feeling or thread, you know.
Yeah, and I'm grateful that we do, actually.
Yeah.
Like, I think that maybe for quite a few people it may seem a little bit delusional, right? It doesn't look like that to me,
What is delusional though about it?
because like there's a certain assumption of self-importance. Like, it's important what you do, and it's important what you kind of bring out into the world, and this belief that there are others out there who kind of resonate with you. And like I said, for me it's not delusional, but I can get the sense that for people who are sort of like more, um, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to. I don't even want to judge this, but I'm just saying that I'm getting the sense that even though like it's something that's normal to us, right? The way that we live, and the kind of drives and the love we have for creation,
Yeah.
is not something that has to be universal, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think that it may look for completely differently to people from the outside.
Yeah.
And I remember that we had talks like where you were kind of like saying, I remember when you said, oh, I'm old, I'm 50, right? And it was 10 years ago or 11
I
years
said
ago. Yes,
that
yes,
easily.
and and so it's yeah. What like the point was like I'm grateful that I do what I do, and that
Yeah.
I'm, even though I'm kind of like a real, um, um, I don't have proper word for this in English, but um, an Angsthase, just German word. Uh, I have lots of anxieties, lots of anxieties, and I feel anxiety like almost all the time. And like I have to force myself to do these things, right? It's not that it comes to me easily. I haven't been made to be on stage. I wasn't made to
Yeah.
contact people on MySpace, or
Yeah.
even to make phone calls to one of the most stressful moments of my life was calling Trey Gunn in a studio in Woodstock in '92 when I
Wow.
like ordered my first stick from him. And like what I'm saying is like all of these, it's always like this sort of struggle, but it's worth it for the outcome of actually being allowed, or allowing yourself to be creative and to make music, and to meet wonderful people like you.
Yeah. I agree though. There is a challenge, and there's all this takes a lot of courage, really, all the way across.
Mhm.
And somehow we muster it when we need to, or we take a risk. I
Mhm.
think I think as a musician, I don't know if everybody feels this way, but I feel this way. I always feel a tremendous amount of self-doubt about any of the music that I make. Any of
Mhm.
it, or the paintings, and then eventually I'm like, I love this piece, but then there's the when you release it, you're like, I don't know, and and that just comes up. I think maybe it's just part of the challenge of being an artist is, you're always looking at your work, and uh, you finish it, and at some point, okay, it's done, release it, put it out, let people see it or hear it, and then you're on to the next thing, whatever that's going to be.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
I don't often look back,
I,
but
you know, I,
there's certain key records that still have spikes to them that I'm like, wow, this is still a good one. But I probably mostly listen to other people, like other jazz records or something. Yeah. But I like the idea of just keep going, keep making, keep creating, keep
for
evolving,
sure. Yeah,
keep
for
trying
sure.
to
But
find new language. And
sometimes I do have this strange idea, or this strange feeling that a certain project, album may be like a point of arrival, right? Like something where,
yeah,
like at a destination that, and it hardly ever, or I don't think ever, it has turned out like that to me. Like, for example, the Heartland String Quartet, like that
yeah.
was like such a big thing for me. And then yeah, there it is, right? And that's it. Okay, that's it. Like nobody, it doesn't kind of like have that life of its own that I would wish for my children. If you think, I'm thinking about my music as kind of like the album, so as children, they don't really yet um, live out there in the world, at least not in the way that I can see it, right?
Yeah.
And that's really um, maybe part of this, what I call the delusion, right? Like where that maybe that's not even the aim, that shouldn't even be the aim. So we, as you say, we just keep going, we do new things, we keep evolving. And I'm so super stoked for you, and surprised and happy that you have made this vocal record, and that is
Oh,
something that came to you. It's really makes me extremely happy to
oh, thank
see that like, and I know how hard you work, and then like seeing that you actually have that payoff creatively, right? And you, where you are actually allowing yourself to challenge yourself, right?
you.
And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And it really gives me, I have to say, may sound stupid, but it gives me hope.
Yeah. Well, you're not the only person that said that. And in fact, Brian, who mixed the album, he goes, your friends are going to be so happy that
Hmm.
you went there where you went. He
Hmm.
said that, Brian did. And I'm like, really? Self doubt. And he goes, dude. he, he goes, yeah. He goes, it's like, it's like it's growth. It's an evolution in a way. It's actually bringing an instrument back into my life. Something that came up this week that I should probably share because it came up in a dance class, but the idea was, I'll tell you about the dance class, but what came up from doing it was the idea that you should be everything that you are, and not compartmentalize like I'm a jazz bebop guy, R&B guy, I'm ambient guy,
Mhm.
I'm a singer guy, I play drums sometimes, whatever, whatever it is. But the idea that be everything you are, bring it all to the table. And I think David Torn told me that one day too. He goes, don't be afraid to play blues licks, you know, bring him in there. If that's part of who you are, bring that shit in there, And Barry has said that to me too. He goes, make sure you do everything you are. But what happened on this dance class Tuesday is I was working with this choreographer, and we came online, and she says, we're going to do an experiment today, Tim. I'm like, what's that? She goes, okay, all the dancers are going to go off screen, so you're not going to be able to see them. I'm going to go off screen, and you're going to go off screen, and we're going to dance to your music. And at first I was disappointed. I was like, ah, but I want to see the dancers because that's where this comes from, this music. And so we all went offline. She goes, begin when you like. And the first thing I thought of was, I looked around my studio. I'm like, oh, I have drums and cymbals and bells and shakers. And um, I thought I would surprise them. So I just put up a loop and I just started playing bells and cymbals and all kinds of stuff I would normally just not do in a live thing. I would just be doing my guitar and
Mhm.
getting as much sound out of that as I could. So in the course of this 30-minute improv, I was playing tom toms with mallets. I was playing thumb piano, like one of these things, and I was just doing all kinds of soundscapes in a totally new way and building up loops eventually and playing the guitar. And we came back online, and the choreographer was physically, her face had changed. And she said, I don't know what happened, but I wept almost most of the time. I
Mhm.
was so moved by that experience.
Mhm.
And then some other dancers came on and they felt the same thing. And I think I was also giving myself permission to just play anything, but also to surprise them or something.
Mhm.
And the fact that it connected, and then it started making me think about, some of these instruments that we play, or bells or cymbals, and how ancient they are, and the properties of the sound, and how they were tied into ritual. You know, the earliest forms of music had a purpose always. Healing, funerals, weddings. And that DNA just connects us all somehow. And I just wonder, like, what was it that made them feel the way they did? So it must be something about the sound of the music or the properties contained within the music. But all that to say is, like, being everything you are is um, something I'm embracing with now the voice again. Although I didn't sing that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You see, I think we've sort of come full circle here from one of the things that I said at the beginning, which
Ah,
was like, you really don't need any particular skills when you improvise because
yeah,
you do what you do, and you have like all the options
yeah,
in that moment, in the present moment, in the
yeah,
here and now. And I think really that is so valuable to me to also realize, I enjoy music as a universal thing. It's not me as the player. It's not me, the touch guitarist.
yeah,
I would love to pick up an acoustic guitar and play, and
yeah,
really, um, you've sort of like built an ideal environment for that. You have that studio, you have the microphones, you have the instruments, so you're
yeah.
clearly at an advantage there over myself. But I totally hear you, and I completely agree, and I will take that to heart, and I'll see that my next projects, they will include me singing. No. Uh,
Whatever it is.
yes, exactly, exactly.
But it's so interesting to go down different roads, and going down different roads. Suddenly, it's like, oh, here's some new. This is all new stuff, you know. And that's part of it. I think the other thing that happened on that dance class was the fact that everybody was off screen. No one could see one another, but we knew we were there.
Yes,
You know,
yeah,
so I think anytime there's a performance involved to some degree, there's that extra spark that happens.
yes,
We're
yeah,
performing, and it
yeah.
puts us in a certain state of mind. So it's cool.
Okay, Tim. So let's stop here.
That sounds good.
Almost 2 hours of
Are you kidding? Wow.
words. Yes.
Nice,
Wonderful to see
nice
you.
improv.
Yes, exactly. um, yeah. So I'll see you in a few months. Let's just say that.
Hopefully sooner than that.
Yes.
Always waving.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Bye.